Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Active Populi podcast. I'm Thomas Lee, and I'm joined by my co-hosts.
Jay Plambella.
And Jack Powell. And today we were talking about Matt Hancock, his extramarital affair with Gina Coladangelo, and his past.
All right,
maybe even his future.
Oh yeah, about his future. That's a good idea. So what happens for Matt Hancock next after this whole problem? Because clearly, the MP currently is acting as if he's made him. I think the term forcefully resigned is probably the best way to look at this, because we can't exactly say he was fired because Boris was quite he kind of moved around that issue a lot, and obviously Matt Hancock himself said he resigned. I think made to resign may be the best way to look at this right now, of all the different interpretations of what's happened here. I don't really see much of a future for Matt Hancock, at least for so many years, in terms of he's probably, I feel like he's been, sent to the backbenches for as long as his career is going to last at this point. What do you think, Jack?
I think he is going to become a private consultant for a banking firm, considering he used to work in the Bank of England. He's probably going to go into a banking firm or a private firm and be a private consultant. He has the network to pull a few strings, so to speak. So I think he would be a useful asset for some firms. Talking about his history in the Bank of England, it was a very spicy. So he became a specialist in the housing market about 3 years before the collapse of the housing market.
That's very suspicious, isn't it?
Very suspicious.
Whilst we're here, shall we talk a bit about?
We'll speculate. Obviously.
He is Matthew John David Hancock was born in 1978. I feel like I'm doing some kind of presentation.
It's all about the man.
But he was born relatively close to where we are. He was born in Chester, and then he went to King's School, school that I very nearly went to actually. And my auntie, because it's Kings and Queens, and my mum went to Queens actually, and then my auntie went to Queens as well, and then Kings. Anyway, so kind of, and then her brother went to Kings, so maybe in the same school even. Then he went to Oxford, like any good Tory minister, did PPE, and then he did. I was very surprised that he did an MPhil in economics at Christ College, Cambridge, a few years later, which is
a degree in economics based in
a master's from Cambridge as well. Not any.
Mm-hmm.
I'm impressed.
And then he went to go and work for the Bank of England, as Jack say, 3 years before the housing market crashed. And he was specialising in the housing market in the Bank of England, which is one of the major banks responsible for the housing crash.
Well,
so,
it is the National Bank of Britain. So it's like banks go to the Bank of England for loans. So
yeah,
it's the National Bank of England is all proper.
Yeah.
So the juicy bits, the affair. Who wants to lay out the a quick?
Well, this is a really exciting. I say exciting. It's always nice to have. I think the last most notable one, I think, was kind of the Jeremy Thorpe scandal. I say the last, but that's kind of a really, really, really famous one, where we have a minister who's accused of having a gay affair and does have a gay affair. And this is the kind of the 70s of the Jeremy Thorpe affair. So yeah, I think it always adds a bit of intrigue and a bit of kind of sexual tension having an affair in the world of politics. And this one has been clear because we're in this kind of the days now of computers, cameras everywhere, and we see this very graphic video that I'm sure everyone's seen of interactions, not as deep as the newspapers would like go on happened, but they seem to be in close embrace, shall we say?
I think
that was the main point, and that was in his little video that he did that reminded me a lot of. I don't know if any of you've seen Little Britain, and they do that sketch of the politician resigning. No, you're all comic novices, but in that one,
I'm in the field of Little Britain, I will admit.
It's a very good sketch show, aside from what's been happening recently. But it reminded me a lot of that sketch when the politician resigned. And there were lots of memes made. There's an enormous amount of memes made out of it. And I presume we'll have a discussion later about kind of satire. Actually, why don't we have a discussion now about satire in politics?
Because we have about 14 minutes left.
It doesn't matter. We can have a little chat.
Oh, okay.
We can have a little chat about satire. Let's go to the satire corner and let's just have a little listen. Let's talk about satire. So satire in politics.
We need us a kind of jingle.
Yeah, we'll throw one in. Jay, you can throw one in. That's your job now. So when it comes to satire in politics, the thing is, does it undermine politicians? Does it like air things that shouldn't be out in the open? Because that's the thing I hear a lot about the matter. That was his first defense. This is a private matter. That's what Boris Johnson did too. This is a private matter that shouldn't be out to the public. And now it gets satirized by the public. It gets thrown around like wildfire. And before you know it, everyone knows about this affair. And the question is, does this undermine people's ability to trust the institutions that they're supposed to put their faith into? What do you guys think?
Well, there's a reason why they lose their trust, because politics is a very a personal job. These guys personally hold responsibility for everybody's lives.
Yeah, they're a servant. They're servant to the public, aren't
they? And the voters want to know about their character so they know how they will react. Say if Matt Hancock is having an extramarital affair, that might be conducive that he isn't the most loyal person, which of course isn't a virtue.
Design characteristic.
You really want to have for someone who's controlling multiple £1 million contracts for the NHS.
Yeah.
As we'll discuss later, his other offences, which are probably more egregious than just having an extramarital affair.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting that the role the public play, and I think that his reputation beforehand. I'm going to draw parallels here between the Jeremy Thorpe scandal, which is an extraordinarily interesting and comical, kind of involving the shooting of a dog, the planning to get a guy eaten alive by a crocodile in Florida, and this is all from a politician, a minister whose constituency was Chipping Norton in Oxfordshire. It's an extraordinary. Yeah. There was an amazing TV dramatisation of it a couple of years ago with. Love Actually guy. What's his name?
No, is it
Hugh Grant? Yeah, Hugh Grant was Jeremy Thorpe, and they had the guy who's Q now in James Bond, the young guy.
I knew about
Q. And he was Jeremy Thorpe's gay lover. Anyway, sorry. Well, the thing is with that is that people who are in Jeremy Thorpe's constituency of Chipping Norton, even though all of this came out and all this intrigue and all of this. Jeremy Thorpe planned to kind of like assassinate the guy and throw him into crocodiles and stuff like this. This actually happened. But his constituency was still really supportive of him. They think, none of this could happen. They still believed in him. So It's interesting to see what the reputation of Matt Hancock played in this. I wonder if he handled the coronavirus situation well beforehand, will there be such of a kind of outright? And also just about satire. I think your point was really good as well, Tom, about does it undermine politicians, but also does it undermine like people's chance to educate in politics? Like if that's all they see is spitting image or memes, it doesn't give them a full picture and an accurate picture of what actually happens in politics, or do they just say, that's funny, this guy cheated?
Yeah, definitely, because that's actually an issue that I've seen. Not to get a bit, to get a bit conspiratorial for a second. There's been some talk. Allegedly, some people believe that this affair might have been drummed up on purpose in order to hide his much more egregious crimes. Because now people think they think the affair guy, and not the guy who might have cost the lives of tragically,
billions of pounds.
Yeah, and people's lives. It's like Christ, he could have just done this. And but obviously now people think he's the affair guy, and they ignore the rest of it, or at least allegedly. That's what some people would like to believe. This affair kind of works as a smokescreen. It makes you feel that in the Jeremy Thorpe situation, it makes you feel like our politicians actually seem a bit tame in comparison to whatever the hell was going on there. If you ask me, Jack, do you want to discuss the previous crimes? Like you understand.
So previous crimes. That was the Green Sill scandal, where lobbied by the previous Prime Minister David Cameron for Lex Greensill. Matt Hancock introduced a payment scheme that was later rolled out through the NHS. Matt Hancock was also the champion against corruption, I think, in Mrs. May's cabinet, which is very interesting. He also gave contracts to his sister, to his sister's company, which he owns a 20% share in, and he also gave contracts to his old landlord, which is very nice and something
generous of him.
You know,
what a completely uncorrupt guy.
Fairly earned contracts, you know. These are clearly very fairly earned, definitely based on the skills of the company and not the fact that they know Matt Hancock himself.
Yeah, so, definitely not.
It could be argued these are millions of pounds misspent, wasted, inefficiently, and it could also be argued that the Conservative Party, the hallmark of the free market capitalists, you know, low corporation tax, this is the opposite of free market. Incentivizing firms isn't, or giving firms to people you know, not based on how good they could do it, is not something any party should do. So that is obviously really bad. You know, he also is a fairly a fairly spineless guy. Not to like get personal here, but he seems to flip-flop between ideologies. For example, he voted against Brexit, but then hopped on Boris Johnson's nationalistic zeal when he realised he could probably get a really high position. I think he, in the way he postured himself, set himself up for a fall, being that he had no good, like, personality to fall upon. Like, you know, Jeremy Thorpe, his constituents believed he wouldn't do that because he had a good reputation. Matt Hancock was known as the timid person who was very corrupt. So
yeah, Matt Hancock hasn't had like a good run of it. None of the Conservative Party politicians covering the current coronavirus pandemic have really had a good time trying to like curtail this. On the other hand, Sajid Javid might have an amazing time bringing something that's already in the closing phases to a close in what appears to be a swift and efficient manner. As far as he's concerned, this could actually be really good for him in his career. Matt Hancock appears to be left as a backbencher. That might just be like his life from here on out. And, you know, what a more fitting end for someone.
I think it's going to be a very glorious, on the contrary, Tom. I think he's going to be, as Jack said, involved in lobbying and kind of making an enormous amount of money, like Gina Coladangelo does by the sounds of it already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
PP. I mean, shall we talk a bit about his extramarital affair and the involvement, her involvement in that? So they both went to Oxford. Actually, they both went to Oxford 3 PPE. And then she's involved, from what I can read, is involved in a lot of she's partnering a lot of firms, and she's kind of investing in a lot of firms. And then she was employed as a unpaid, suspicious advisor to the Secretary of Health.
Yeah,
and there's loads of these comments saying that they like she knew more than him and all of this kind of conspiracy. I think.
Yeah.
But it's interesting nonetheless.
It is,
and it makes you think. I think that they're probably going to be making a lot of money, and not having a particularly miserable life. Unlike Martha Hancock and the 3 kids who he is leaving behind. And you can say what you want, but that's rather
bad.
Bad and disloyal.
There's a better way to get out of a relationship that you personally don't believe in than having an affair on the side. There's definitely a more courteous way to end things than what he's done here. Sure. And I think, and the cherry on the top is obviously he's broke his own rules in terms of like in terms of the coronavirus rules that he himself had obviously put in place. And this breaks people's faith in him probably a lot more than the satirists ever could, because he's given them this story on a silver platter and done the worst for himself.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if this, because the satirists, as you say, brought attention to this, but they didn't bring attention to the amount of lives he cost through his frankly negligent PPE contracts and through his kind of negligent PP to the NHS, through all of these things that we see. why weren't people questioning his integrity beforehand? Why does it take this to do that?
It feels like, the Sun newspaper can't make a really nice headline out of
I think it speaks volumes, doesn't it, for kind of the role of media in politics.
Journalistic integrity as a whole.
I mean, we've done a half decent job at showing the bad sides of Matt Hancock, but I think we should give him the credit he deserves in how he's handled the situation of COVID-19 relatively okay compared to a few other countries. So it's estimated that the
wasn't him though. That was the scientists. He didn't do much apart from allocating the thing. I think we need to be very danger about praising him.
Yeah,
I think that
we should show the good stuff he's done along with showing the bad stuff he's done.
I think it's very, very, very hard to do that. The amount of money he's wasted on PPE, the amount of excess debt he's caused in the NHS.
Well,
I really don't think there's space for much praise at all. The thing is, if we're going to try to
it is estimated that the vaccination program, of which we were leading in the early stages, especially for a big country, there were these outliers like Israel and Qatar, for a very small population, perhaps even a unaccounted for population in some cases, that are really rich and kind of abnormal. But for a big country, we were ahead of the peloton, to use cycling terms. It is estimated that the vaccination program has prevented 7.2 million infections and 27,000 deaths in England. The source of that is the BBC, funded by you, the taxpayer. So that is certainly something good Matt Hancock's done. Being the Secretary of Health for National Health, we cannot say, oh, that was just for scientists, because if...
yeah, some input, clearly.
Yeah, because if I was in charge and I just went to bed for a year, I wouldn't have done that. Matt Hancock has done something, and he has done something relatively good.
Okay, I will contest that with saying the 37 billion wasted on track and trace, the 300 NHS staff who were normal or ordinary age people died of coronavirus. I think these come in leaps and bounds. I would say Matt Hancock is probably the worst health secretary that this country's ever had. And then second is Jeremy Hunt, who near enough sold the NHS. I guess the point of being kind of non-partisanity we need to aim for, but we also need to be very careful about praising people who've done a negligent job in government.
Although there's a difference between praising and outlining both the negatives and positives of someone's career. Because while you can obviously say, and I 100% agree, what he's done like poorly here outweighs what he's done well, you still have to acknowledge those glimmers of hope in between the rest of his abysmal career, at least abysmal as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. Should we wrap it up? Is that everything when it comes to Matt Hancock? Is that everything?
I think we are going to have to wrap it up soon because of our rather short time slot. It has been a pleasure, and I hope that you think the same. So, to conclude, Matt Hancock is a bad guy, but not too bad if you're not Jay Palambella, at which he is literally the devil.
Okay, that might be overselling it, but it's a good episode of the Active Populi podcast. I hope you guys would join us next week. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.